There's a distinction that needs to be made pretty early when you think about it. It's not living for your glory, it's living for God's glory and in God's glory. So it all stems from what we've been learning about this week, about how we're loved by God and He's saved us, and there's nothing that can come between us. And so it's in that glory, that's the glory that we're living in, that we're trying to ground every day in. And so I was trying to think about the foundation that we live in that glory, the thing that we get that glory from and then put it into practice. We sort of get that through prayer. That's got to be the basic building step. And prayer is not something that I've ever found easy. Never in my life, including now, I've never felt there was a time in my life where prayer was particularly easy. But, I would always see all these people at church praying, and, I always wanted to have that. I wanted to be able to pray like they were just so focused, and every time I would get down and kneel down and pray, I would just, distraction after distraction, I just could never get anything right. So I sort of saw that as the pinnacle of living a Christian life, is being able to pray and having that relationship with God where you're able to talk to Him and He's talking back and you can actually hear what He's saying or understand what He wants from you. So that was always the sort of thing that I was sort of striving for, and but this in that prayer's always sort of developed in my mind in the way I've sort of used prayer and thought about prayer. Very, in the early days when I was a lot younger, I always thought of prayer as a need-based thing. So if I wanted something or something was wrong, then that's when I would turn to prayer. It was very selfish in that way. It wasn't about me wanting to talk to God, it was me wanting to get something from God. It was just God, I'm having a tough time, which is, all these things are still good and they have their place, but it shouldn't be the only place that you're praying with God. So He wants to be there with you in your struggles, but that was sort of the only time I was talking to God. And so it was very one-dimensional. It wasn't until I was much older where I was sort of struggling with this idea where I wasn't feeling like I was getting anything out of prayer, where I sort of realized it's not about that need-based thing, it's about a relationship. So it's just like you're talking to another friend, to anyone else you ever would. Your best friend, your closest friend, the person that you know, or who knows you more than you know yourself. And when you sort of think about it in those terms, it's less formal then. You just sort of, you can talk in a language that you're comfortable with, and that way you're sort of pouring out more of your heart. And so that style of prayer, I guess, came from how I viewed God. So I wasn't just viewing Him as someone who passed judgment or someone who could give me what I wanted. I was thinking of Him as a friend, and that's sort of the difference there. So as I started to mature in my faith, I started to see more ways of being able to pray. It was more flexible than I first thought. It wasn't just kneeling down and praying in Mass or just reading the Bible, although those things are excellent and they absolutely have their place, and for some people that's the way they're praying, that's awesome. But I just wasn't connecting there. I found it really hard to, as I said before, I got really distracted. And I found it very hard to respond, and I was really annoyed about that. I was just I really want to do well at this prayer thing, but it's just not working, God, why am I so distracted? So to combat this, the prayer style that I found that really worked for me was praise and worship. And although I never tell anyone, I really love to sing. And it was something that I was more in tune with. I was able to put my heart into it more, and I was able to focus. And the other thing about that style of prayer was that it wasn't about me. It wasn't about something that I wanted. It was about giving praise to God. because, well, I think I turned to that because I've always had this awe for the whole God thing. Like, it's just amazing. Like, I've always been able to get very caught up in in just God's bigness and His love and His, like, in creation and that sort of thing. It's something that I've been really able to get in touch with. So praise and worship, where I was able to sort of say, thanks for that, man, you're awesome, that sort of thing. It came much more naturally to me. So there was the difference in motive there. It was about giving thanks to God rather than asking God to give me stuff. And that sort of shattered my expectations of what I thought prayer was all about. And that didn't make the other things easier once I was able to sort of get into praise and worship. It didn't make praying quietly any easier. But in praise and worship, although it's really good and I loved it, I still felt I wasn't getting a response from God. Like I wasn't able to get that two-way sort of thing. And so, I really just want, as much as I'd like to just God to say, Kieran, this is how you're being a Christian today, or just to receive a letter in the mail of the good things I have to do today, it's about, it wasn't coming in the way I was expecting. I wasn't listening in the right way. And that's one of the things that I still struggle with. But I found that I was getting answers in more subtle ways, through relationships, through opportunities that were coming up in my life. That sort of thing were the ways I was sort of getting answers from God. So I think if I was giving advice to people on how to pray, I would say think about how you view God, think about your relationship with God, and then what prayer style corresponds with that picture of God. A lot of people really like journaling and or doing artwork and that sort of thing, and that's really sort of the biggest thing. I realized that there's so many ways to pray, and because it's a personal relationship with God, you need to put your person into it rather than trying to fit into a mold of how to pray. And then secondly, sort of make sure your heart is in it, and that'll come with putting your own spin on prayer, and that's the way that I sort of got into it, making sure my heart was in it. And then I knew I was really, I felt comfortable in it, and I think you'll feel that as well. And then so thirdly, be open to reply in any form. So it's really hard because we're all really busy, and with school and whatever, and so it's hard to sort of be reflective like that, and to realize when God's actually, putting a huge sign in front of your face and you're just not looking because you're, waiting for a different sort of response. So I think once you've got prayer down pat, you're right, and that really is the foundation. And you can definitely tell when I've been praying too much because I'm often very grumpy and I'm not as loving in my relationships. So it really does affect the way that you interact with others. And the other thing I will say about prayer is it's not so important for how long you pray. It's more important how regular it is. I think God would much prefer 5 minutes every day than 1 hour once a week. It's bringing, and in that way you're bringing Him into your everyday life. You're bringing Him into your relationships, into your schoolwork, and into your work, into your jobs and whatever. So, I think the real way to live for glory, to live in God's glory, is to bring Him into your life. And once you've done that, He starts to work through you, and you'll see the fruits absolutely. And I don't think it gets any easier, and it's hard the whole way. But the rewards totally outweigh the work. So that's my 2 cents. So I think we're working on it now.